The Denver Broncos made a surprising change on Wednesday, right before practice had began, by releasing veteran outside linebacker Randy Gregory. What type of implications does this have for Denver going forward? Plus, we hear from Frank Clark, Nik Bonitto, and we recap practice on today's brand new episode, Good Morning Broncos. Good morning, Broncos country. Welcome into another episode of GMB, your daily bite-sized Broncos conversation with a cup of coffee every single weekday, Monday through Friday, Mile High Sports on the YouTube page, 9 o'clock a.m. Mountain Time. Do us a favor, hit that subscribe button so you never miss out on Colorado sports coverage. Every team, every day, including Denver Nuggets season coming up. Ryan Blackburn will have you covered on the Pickaxe and Roll podcast. Eric Dean will have you covered with everything Colorado Avalanche related. And, of course, you're going to get constant coverage and content here about the Denver Broncos on GMB. Today's episode show is brought to you by our friends over there, Superbook Sports. I'm Cody Roark, Broncos reporter for MHS here. And, look, we got a lot to talk about here today, Broncos country. Yesterday was a little bit of a wacky day. It was a wild day in Broncos country. There was some breaking news early on Wednesday, shortly after we did GMB. Yesterday, it came out that the Broncos were releasing veteran outside linebacker Randy Gregory. Now, while it was announced that he was released, as we're talking about this right now, there's a process, and Sean Payton told us on Wednesday following practice that there's a little bit of a 24 to 48-hour process that they're going to wait to see if there's a team out there that might be interested in trading for him. And obviously that doesn't come to fruition, I think, by Friday. Then they'll officially release him. It'll become official. It frees up a roster spot there. But a little bit of a surprise move on Wednesday here for Denver. And I think looking back at it, right, because he signed, I think 2 years ago in free agency, he signed a 5-year, $70 million contract with the team. And unfortunately, last season, through the first 4 weeks, he was a fantastic addition. I mean, he was making a tremendous impact. And then he suffered the torn meniscus injury in that Week 4 loss against the Las Vegas Raiders last season. Held him out of action until he made his return around Week 15. Just didn't have his legs fully underneath him at that point. And then they kind of shut him down for the season after the LA Rams game on Christmas. And they were just hoping, okay, hey, clean bill of health. Let's see if he can get into the offseason here and be fully ready to go. And that was the case. And just didn't have a great start to his time here in Denver this season under Sean Payton, under Vance Joseph defensively, though he did come up with 1 sack in Week 2 against Sam Darnold. It was a great play by him. But there was just this, I don't know, something seemed off in the last couple of weeks. And it was brought up to, especially after that Broncos loss to the Miami Dolphins, a lot of effort stuff was being brought into question. And Sean Payton talked about that. And he even addressed it a little bit following Wednesday's practice, that there was just a multitude of things. And they felt like it was the best decision overall for the team to move on from Randy Gregory at this point in time. And that also kind of fueled where, hey, we saw Nik Bonitto this past week against the Chicago Bears. He got his first start of this season, and he got 2.5 sacks, was an impact player, made one of the biggest plays of the game that allowed Denver to secure that victory. He and Jonathan Cooper, Sean Payton is very pleased with those two young guys. There's some other moves coming up as well. So let's talk about maybe the implications here real quick of what it means for Randy Gregory's release here by the Denver Broncos. Like we said, not official, but they've designated him as released until if they can find someone to trade with, then they'll do that. If not, in the next 24 to 40 hours, they will officially release him there. But he is no longer a member of the Denver Broncos going forward here. So what this means, because he signed, obviously, a 5-year contract worth $70 million. By releasing him, the Broncos, they're going to incur the cost of $16.1 million in dead cap space here this year, but also does something for them next year in 2024. Frees up around $9.8 million in the salary cap, according to SpotTrack. So something to keep an eye on there here for Denver. Obviously, they're anticipated right now as it stands to be over the cap going into next season. They'll have to do some fluctuating. And obviously, we might see some more moves, up through the NFL trade deadline at this point here. But that's the move that we're talking about here. Randy Gregory, no longer a member of the Denver Broncos. Nik Bonitto, Jonathan Cooper, those guys are going to be the guys here going forward. And so before we dive a little bit deeper into that, Broncos country, I wanted to open things up and show you, here's our practice recap that we had from yesterday in Dove Valley, kind of setting the stage a little bit for what we're going to continue to talk about. Here you go. There's bad blood in the air this week as the New York Jets come to town to take on the Denver Broncos. See what I did there. But help could be on the way here for the Denver Broncos. I'm Cody Roark, Broncos reporter from Mile High Sports. Wednesday morning, prior to practice, the Denver Broncos released veteran pass rusher Randy Gregory after he signed a 5-year, $70 million contract 2 seasons ago. It was a mutual split between the two parties as Gregory didn't feel like he was a good fit here after being demoted and Nik Bonitto stepping up in place of him this past Sunday. Now you have the starting dynamic of Jonathan Cooper, Nik Bonitto. Both guys combined for 3.5 sacks this past week, and the Broncos win against the Chicago Bears, but they could be getting more help back. On Wednesday's practice, we saw Frank Clark, we saw Baron Browning. Both of these guys were back at practice at the outside linebacker position, so things are shaping up very nicely in terms of guys they could be getting back that could help a struggling defense at this point in time. On top of that, there was P.J. Locke, who made his return to practice as well. Mike Purcell, Justin Simmons, and Josie Jewell, guys who were out of action last week, are back this week, and we'll see what type of progress they make, if they're limited, full participants, but signs point that they could be ready to go here on Sunday against Zach Wilson, Nathaniel Hackett, and the New York Jets. Now, a side note here in terms of players who are on the side field for the Broncos here on Wednesday. Javonte Williams suffered a hip flexor injury on Sunday's game. He was on the side field working over there with trainers alongside Greg Dulcich, who's still on injured reserve, Alex Palczewski, who's on injured reserve, and K'Wan Williams was on the side field. So Denver's getting guys back, and they could be getting even more here soon. I'm Cody Roark, Broncos reporter, Mile High Sports. Check out milehighsports.com and Good Morning Broncos every single day on Mile High Sports YouTube page. And I think outside of the Randy Gregory news, the news that guys are coming back from injury is huge. It was great to see Justin Simmons out there on the field, Josie Jewell. I mean, even talking about Mike Purcell coming back as well, those guys being on the field. But more importantly, you're getting a guy in the secondary like P.J. Locke. He's going to be back in the mix. His first full practice of the regular season since going on short-term injured reserve. Denver needs as many guys as they can on the defensive side of the ball to help maybe try to find a way to turn the tide here from what's gone on in the last couple of weeks. The Broncos defense has allowed over 1,000 yards in the last 2 weeks to opponents. They've 2 points away from allowing 100 points in 2 games here. That's not a great formula here for Denver. They're going to have to make some changes defensively. We saw some personnel changes with Bonitto getting the start. We saw Jaquan McMillan get the start. Obviously, Asang Bassi was waived. He signed with the Los Angeles Chargers, an AFC West divisional rival there. So it was a little bit of a chaotic day on Wednesday there, Broncos country. So as we've talked about maybe setting the stage a little bit, what to expect here, that also means that with the news of Randy Gregory, we talked about it, you heard it on the practice recap, Baron Browning has been officially activated from the PUP list. And look, there's going to be a little bit more time for him. He has a 21-day period to where he's going to get up to speed, but he was back at practice. He was in pads, as you saw, and he's going to have to get the conditioning side of it down. You know, we talk about lung conditioning in general. He's been running the field on the side field throughout the last couple of weeks. But I think the thing that we talk about in terms of conditioning, there's like lung capacity conditioning, and then there's football conditioning where there's a lot of physical contact. There's a lot of hitting people, and that takes you out. Like, it takes energy to do that. So he's going to have to get back to that speed. But, man, it's going to be great to have him back in the mix here for Denver. I'll be very curious to see what they do from a personnel standpoint when we talk about what does the rotation look like. Like, if Jonathan Cooper and Nik Bonitto are going to be the starters, does that mean that you're going to see Frank Clark and Baron Browning as the 2 guys rotating in off the edge, which isn't a bad thing there, but they also have Thomas Incoom on the roster. They have Marcus Haynes. They have these 2 guys that are also outside linebackers relative on the active roster and practice squad. So what is Denver going to do? How do they fluctuate that? Are they going to have to make some more moves? Because think about it as well. We even talk about guys on the side field. Javonte's on the active roster. I don't think he's going to be out of action for quite some time. I don't think that's going to be the case here. We'll see where his status is at as the week goes, but I imagine we'll see him back at some point this week, and if not, maybe next week as the team prepares for a Thursday night football matchup shortly after Sunday's game here. But I think you have to factor in how do you maneuver your personnel? How do you get your best players on the field, right? Frank Clark did return to practice as well, and that's a great sign. And look, we actually got to hear from him. So Broncos country, first off, let's talk about this. Frank Clark, obviously a veteran presence here in the NFL at the edge rusher position. He shared his thoughts on what had gone on, obviously the news surrounding Randy Gregory. Here's what he had to say.
At the end of the day, you want to finish the season with your guys. You come into this together. You go through camp together. So, you build that sense of togetherness. So, just not seeing him every day around here. It's going to be a change, but, like I said earlier, you got a bunch of young guys who's willing to step up and do the job. And, as long as we keep having those guys that's, ready when their name is called, I think we'll be all right.
And a lot of those guys stick together, too. Randy's a veteran. Frank's a veteran. And when Frank came in, Randy was one of the first guys to welcome him in and kind of show him how things are done here in Denver. And those two are have a very good bond. I'd say all those guys in the outside linebacker room have a great bond with Randy Gregory. And that's what kind of makes it a little unfortunate, but this is the NFL business side of things. And these guys get it. But, hey, that's a guy that they call a friend. They call a brother. And that right there, I think, is something that doesn't get touched on enough because we look at the NFL often at times. People in media and fans alike look at it very transactionally versus the aspect that these guys develop close friendships and brotherhoods and bonds. And that stuff is also important because we do the same thing in our lives and our professions with maybe some of our coworkers. So there is that, but with Frank Clark returning back healthy this week, there's still a little bit of ways away for him to go. He wants to feel like he's made good progress, and he got some reps overall for the team on Wednesday. Here's what he had to say about how he's feeling from a health standpoint.
I felt pretty good. Was able to get some good team reps in. Was able to do some running. I think this is last week is my first full week of running. Just intense, high intense running, getting some good numbers, hitting some good numbers at around 90%. But this week, this is my first. I said I wanted to get out there and practice, feel that weight of the pads and stuff, hit it a little bit. You got to feel a few guys pushing on you and stuff, redirection them before you truly know, if you're ready out there. And I was able to get that done today. Like I said, that's day one. It's a process, though. When you're injured, you don't never want to get back out there. It's an urgency to get back out on the field to help your teammates, but at the same time, you got to protect the team and yourself by allowing yourself to go out there.
And obviously, if he is able to go this Sunday, it'll be a welcome addition here for the Broncos. Not sure, as well as we've talked about, if Barron's going to be able to go this week, but he has 3 weeks, 21 days essentially to get to where he needs to be. I'm sure he's going to get there at some point. I'll be very curious to see when that is here for the Denver Broncos. We also heard from outside linebacker Nik Bonitto, who stepped into a big role last week, 2.5 sacks, a forced fumble, and that really helped the Broncos tie the game and ultimately fueled them to secure the comeback victory here. Here's what he had to say about Randy Gregory and his presence, and obviously on learning the news on Wednesday morning about the release of Gregory inside that locker room.
I was sad just knowing the type of guy he was. He's always been a guy where he's been helping me and Coop out, the young guys, and just making sure that whenever a time did come like this, that we would be ready to come and step in and be ready. So missing the guy, it's gonna be missed a lot. He was a really good veteran presence in the room.
And I'll tell you this too, Randy Gregory did a fantastic job with mentoring these guys and being a vocal guy for them. And look, I know fans are going to say, well, he didn't play that well. Randy is very well liked in that locker room by his teammates. And I've had the chance to get to know Randy over the course of the last year and a half. And I've really appreciated how open he's been. And honestly, I think at times vulnerable, right? He's been very big and opened up about some of the struggles he's had with mental health. And we don't highlight that enough in society. We need to do a little bit more of that, especially when it comes to pro athletes. And it doesn't matter how much money you make. We all deal with issues. Whether you're making millions, you can still suffer negative mental health outcomes and mindsets. And I think Randy Gregory was a big advocate for that in terms of the support and just being very open about it. And I hope it normalizes that for you. And if you're listening to this, but I think that's also important to talk about here. But unfortunately, Nik Bonitto understands the business side of things here in the NFL and knows that, hey, he's going to have to continue to step up. Here's what he said he would like to see from himself in order to continue taking the next step.
Just continuing to, hone in on the little details, continuing to, play fast, play hard and things of that nature. And, don't, just have one good week and then be okay. But, just keep continuing to build on it.
And I think that's perfectly well said there. The consistency factor, doing things week in and week out, is probably the most important thing that he can do in regards to his continued development. I mean, the strides that he's made from last year as a rookie to now, I mean, it's monumental. He's an entirely different player when you look at him on the tape, when you watch him against the run, when you watch him in his pass rush set, like just the way that he approaches the game is so different. But he mentioned the key thing there is I've just got to continue to stack it. I can't just do it 1 week. I've got to do it week in and week out. And I think that's obviously a challenge for anybody in the NFL, but that's also something he's not shying away from. He's open for the opportunity. He's eager to make it happen. So that's something I think to keep an eye on here for the Broncos going forward. I also think Denver can maybe be creative at times if they wanted to with the return of Frank Clark and Baron Browning and insert maybe a NASCAR package. Maybe you slide one of those guys to defensive end. Denver also has a guy on the roster too that they signed from New England, and that is Ronnie Perkins, who also played alongside Nik Bonitto and has experience with Jamar Cain, the Broncos pass rush specialist. So for me, Denver, if something's not working defensively, especially on the defensive line, can you shift one of those guys down to play that DN role and maybe have the best 11 guys on the field here. I mean, I think that's something you have to consider here for Denver if the trend of the defense continues going the way it is. But if you get guys like Justin Simmons back, Josie Jewell back, Mike Purcell back, gosh, that adds beef and that adds the potential for Denver to try to find a way to get things right. But if you're missing some of your key guys, it's hard. It's hard to overcome that. It's hard to overcome the loss of a guy like Justin Simmons if he's not on the back end of the secondary playing alongside Kareem Jackson. You're asking a lot in a young guy like Delarian Turner-Yell, who I thought actually did a really good job stepping up this past week against Chicago. He came up with a couple of run stops on key third down situations, and he made some plays. He's a young guy, but that's good development for him. But obviously, the NFL, the goal is to have your best players on the field. If Justin Simmons was missing, that's a big blow to what Denver has because he's one of their best ball hawks, and he's a commander of that defense in terms of lining guys up and making sure that they're in the right situations. We got to see that consistency factor gel in. So if he returns, I think that Denver, they should be better defensively than they have been so far. But there's a lot of work to be done between now and then. And obviously, it doesn't get any easier with the New York Jets coming to town. Zach Wilson, Garrett Wilson, Robert Sala's aggressive defense. And the Broncos are going to have to find a way to get rid of some of those mistakes that they've made. And Sean Payton told us specifically on Wednesday, eliminating the explosives defensively is a huge thing that they've got to figure out how to do because opposing offenses are finding success with chunk yardage and big plays that keep their drives alive or they're scoring on it. We've seen that at the rate in the last couple of weeks here. And obviously, I think offensively, he wants them to be more efficient, not only just avoiding pre-snap penalties like false starts, but can we shore up some areas here to be more efficient than we have been? I mean, he believes that the Broncos offense can be better than it has been. Certainly, they have room to grow there, but they have been a strong part of what they've been able to achieve so far this season from a success standpoint. We'll see if they can continue to build on that there. But Broncos country, I appreciate you for rocking with me here on this morning's episode of Good Morning Broncos. Heading out to the Centura Health Training Center here today for Thursday's practice. What are we going to learn? What does the injury report look like? Well, you're going to get all that on tomorrow's brand new episode of GMB.